This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by IBM. Big data at the speed of business.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of straight talk radio. I want to welcome new listeners joining us on radio affiliates across all 50 states, as well as members of our armed forces who are tuning in from faraway places over the internet. Thank you for making us part of your news week. Today, we're going to step away from politics, healthcare, threats from Russia, ISIS, and North Korea, immigration reform, and climate change to take a look at the really big picture. We're going to speak to the former CFO of Pixar and the man responsible for making Steve Jobs a billionaire, Mr. Lawrence Levy, about the subject of leadership. Powerful leaders and personalities have been known to quash collaboration and creativity, but under Levy's stewardship, Pixar found a way to balance the competing interests of a mercurial entrepreneur with the collaborative needs of artists and technologists. In today's program, we're going to find out how Levy achieved that balance, a balance that resulted in a revolution in animation and animated films, and a balance we can certainly use more of in governance, business, and modern life. But before Mr. Levy joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Lawrence B. Levy was originally from London, England. He earned his undergraduate degree from Indiana University and his law degree from Harvard Law School. Levy worked for one of the early and preeminent technology law firms, Wilson, Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati. He specialized in technology licensing and distribution before moving on to become the chief financial officer for Electronics for Imaging. In 1994, Levy received a phone call from Steve Jobs inviting him to become the CFO of Pixar. Levy was pivotal in transforming Pixar from an animation technology company to a successful leader in animation films, something that we'll hear more about later in today's program. Following his executive post at Pixar, Levy served for a brief time as the CEO of Shockwave, after which he stepped away from corporate life to pursue a lifelong passion, and that was to study the relationship between Eastern philosophy and the pursuit of excellence. In 2003, Levy founded the Juniper Foundation, a nonprofit focused on integrating Eastern meditation practices with contemporary life. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report former CFO of Pixar and the author of best-selling book To Pixar and Beyond, Mr. Lawrence Levy. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Levy.
Hi, Rebecca. I'm delighted to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
First, let me congratulate you on the success of your book, To Pixar and Beyond. I picked it up very late one night, and I was mad. I didn't get any sleep. I could not put the book down. It's fascinating. It documents your work with Steve Jobs and the artistic and technological teams at Pixar. And I thought maybe a good place to start our conversation today might be for you to tell us about the condition Pixar was in when you joined them and why you decided to accept Steve Jobs' offer to become CFO.
Sure, I'm happy to describe that. I'm delighted to hear that you couldn't put the book down. You know, I told my agent that I was going to turn an IPO into a page-turner. Just watch me. And,
it's a great story. It's a fascinating story because, you know, your life, like everybody's, you know, it takes twists and turns, and each twist that it took prepared you for the next opportunity in an unexpected and remarkable way.
Yeah, it certainly did. And so to get to your question, you know, in 1994, you would think that if I told somebody, hey, I got a call from Steve Jobs to go run the company Pixar, you would think that's the greatest phone call you could get in the world. And the great Steve Jobs wants you to go run the great Pixar. But in 1994, couldn't have been anything further from that. Steve was at a real low point in his career. He had basically 4 failures in a row: the original Apple Macintosh, the Apple Lisa, the Next computer, and the little-known Pixar imaging computer, because Pixar started off its life as a graphics and hardware company, and many people were writing him off. And at the same time, Pixar was perceived as kind of being the little company that couldn't. It had 10 years of all this great technology, but nothing to show for it. And so it was a very difficult decision to take that position in the first place. And then when I got into the company, I found out that things were just way worse than I even imagined they could be.
Well, they had pretty much eaten through most of the $50 million investment Jobs had made, hadn't they?
Completely. When I joined Pixar in late 1994, the shortfall in the monthly payroll was paid for by a personal check from Steve Jobs. So that is a company that's operating on a shoestring.
Wow. Now, I thought it was interesting when you talked about why you decided to take the job, that you had seen some clips of Toy Story, and you became concerned about the characters' safety. Is that right?
Yeah. When I first went up to Pixar, and nothing about the place was inspiring at all. It was just in this run-down building in Point Richmond, California. There were no tech companies there. It was pretty far away from Silicon Valley. And I was just, what is this? What am I doing here? Then I get sat down in this old sort of screening room, which was full of the kind of couches that you would see people leaving at the end of the driveway to be picked up. And then they rolled what was the first few minutes of Toy Story with all kinds of excuses, like it wasn't finished and the music wasn't final, the voices wasn't final. But I just sat there, and it was the scene where the little army men go to scout out what Andy's new birthday presents are, and one of them gets trodden on by Andy's mother. And in that moment, I was kind of like, wow, I'm worried about this little green army man on the computer screen. But I realized then that there was something magic going on inside that building. I didn't know how they got there or where they were going to go, but somewhere there was magic.
Somehow they solicited empathy, and I'm always amazed when I watch an animated film that I have feelings about the characters, even though I know they're invented and fictitious and all, but certainly when it's done right, it does solicit those feelings. Now, it's not that unusual for technology companies to be driven by powerful personalities like Jobs or Larry Ellison, Eric Schmidt, but sometimes that power and passion can overwhelm the creative process. And, as you know, creative is all about risk and exploration, lots of false starts and so on. How did you strike the right balance?
Well, it took a while. It's very tempting for executives to want to sort of take control and hold the reins in the creative process. But we realized that at Pixar pretty early on that we were not filmmakers. So the top executives of the company, Steve Jobs, myself, Ed Catmull as well, we weren't storytellers. And it's easy to think that you have the ability to critique a film. But it turns out that storytelling is a very deep art. And we realized that the only people that could really make decisions about that art would be the storytellers themselves. And so we didn't try to sort of override what they wanted to do. But it takes a lot of discipline and courage to do that.
I think it takes a tremendous amount of discipline and self-control on the part of the executives responsible for the leadership in the company to step back and say, we're going to put storytelling ahead of all else.
Yes, it's very tempting. In all creative processes, not just storytelling, but any kind of. The thing about innovation in startup companies is that whether you're making animated feature films or any other kind of new product, is that you're going somewhere which, by definition, no one's ever been there before. You're breaking through new ground, and so what happens is that it's almost impossible to do that without a lot of mistakes along the way, and those mistakes can be very expensive. When you get into the middle of making a animated feature film and you realize that your lead character isn't working or the film isn't funny or something like that, it's a very expensive mistake. It can cost $25 million.
That's a very sobering moment.
It's very sobering.
Well, we have to take our first break, but
okay.
Stay where you are. When we return, we'll find out how Pixar renegotiated their relationship with Disney and how this culminated in becoming part of Disney. You're listening to the Costa Report. If you're a fan of big ideas and thinking, then you're going to want to sink your teeth into On the Verge. Jim Lehrer, John Scully, Alan Dershowitz, and dozens of business and government leaders from the full political spectrum have given On the Verge their highest reviews. And you can help drive the book to the top of the bestseller list by ordering On the Verge from Amazon right now. Our goal is to distribute 25,000 copies before the official release date. By placing your order for On the Verge right now, you'll help us beat that number. We need every listener to go to Amazon.com and order On the Verge as quickly as you can. And while you're at Amazon, order first edition gift copies of On the Verge for friends and family because they won't last long. On the Verge, on sale now at Amazon.com. That's On the Verge at Amazon.com.
When I say Italy, what comes to mind?
Venice.
Capri. Oh my gosh, Capri was marvelous.
The views, the cliffside views, or traveling to Sorrento.
Pirello Tours.
Oh, Pirello Tours, for sure.
Pirello.
Hi, I'm Steve Pirillo of Pirillo Tours. With over 70 years of tour experience to Italy, it's no wonder Pirillo Tours is synonymous with travel to Italy.
I think of the culture.
And to walk up to certain areas and touch a wall and think, well, this wall's like 3,000 years old.
Being on a Pirillo tour on our anniversary was better than anything I can remember ever on an anniversary.
I personally approve every itinerary to ensure a stress-free, once-in-a-lifetime vacation.
Salute! Call now for your free insider's guide to Pirillo's Italy. Call in the next 30 minutes and qualify for a $100 gift card when you travel with us. Call 800-897-7176, 800-897-7176, 800-897-7176.
Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. At 7 a.m., I shower. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. At 7 a.m., I shower. I start laundry at 8. At 10, we go for a walk. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m.
For those dealing with the daily struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. That's why AARP created a community with experts and other caregivers for advice, tips, and support. Together, let's help each other better care for ourselves and the ones we love. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
I am done with my mattress. That's right. I'm not spending another night on this old bag. My new mattress comes today, and this thing is out of here. Bye-bye, mattress.
Yep. Bye-bye, mattress. So says you and about 1,000 other people every day. And that's a lot of old mattresses with no place to go. There's the landfill, of course, where they just take up space. But what a waste. Because you could send it to a mattress recycler, where old mattresses get broken down into steel, foam, wood, and fiber that become new steel, carpet padding, home insulation, garden mulch, biomass fuel, locomotive oil filters, and all kinds of other great stuff. So bye-bye mattress is right. But don't toss it. Recycle it. It's easy. And it's free. To find a mattress recycler in your area, visit buybuymattress.com.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is former CFO of Pixar and founder of the Juniper Foundation, Mr. Lawrence Leevy. And before we went to break, you were talking about how expensive and tempting it is for executives to take control of the creative process, particularly when things are not going well. And yet, by virtue of the fact that creative endeavors mean trying things that have never been attempted, executives need to exercise great restraint.
That's right. You know, I would go so far as to say that in creative endeavors of new innovation, it never goes well. And so I don't think, for example, at Pixar, there wasn't a film made at Pixar that didn't hit some crisis point where the studio felt it was impossible to get it done and the project was a complete disaster. And those are the exact moments when, as an executive, you want to say, okay, you had your shot. Now we have to sort of come in and make sure this is efficient and get it done on time. And that's where you sort of lose that creative edge. And so you have to have faith in your creative people to work through those moments. But that can mean, like, as an executive, you're really holding your breath, hoping that you come through.
Yes, I can imagine. You know, you don't hear very many top executives even use the word comfortably, faith. You know, that word doesn't generally come into the boardroom.
Well, it's right, but it's one of the reasons why innovation is so difficult. Even for larger companies to keep innovating is very challenging because of that reason. Because you lose the ability to sort of take risk.
Yes, and you are right. It is an act of faith. Now, in many ways, this initial relationship that Pixar had with Disney was both a blessing and a curse because Disney tied Pixar's hands in the early days. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yes, this is one of my biggest surprises when I first went into Pixar, and you'd think I would have understood the nature of that relationship with my background as a lawyer, but I didn't have experience in entertainment law, and when I discovered that what Disney essentially did was put a stranglehold around Pixar and control everything that it would do in the field of animation for what could have been a period of 10 or 15 years. And I almost couldn't see a way out of out of that at all. I came back when I realized that. I told my wife I had made the biggest mistake of my career by joining Pixar. Which seems funny now, but at the time it was really kind of painful.
Well, then you had to draw on your own faith at that moment.
I did. I think I had enough experience in startups to know that it's often rough going, and you sort of have to devise a strategy. It's funny to say, like one of the strategies at Pixar that I remember talking to Steve about this for the first time and saying, Pixar needs to become an entertainment company, and that seems so strange now because that's how everybody knows it. But nobody thought of Pixar as an entertainment company, not even Pixar. It was kind of a graphics company. It was a hardware company. It was doing this animation stuff on the side. And I could see that nothing had any possibility of scaling in terms of its technologies. The only thing that had any chance was animated feature films, and that was a long shot. I knew it would be virtually impossible to finance the company because no studio had made itself into like an animated feature film company since Disney in the 1930s. And so the whole thing looked like a long shot. But in startups, you don't have time to sort of indulge in different options. You really have to pick something and go for it. And that was the thing to go for. So Disney contract, whatever it was, we have to go for it.
And you did renegotiate. You were also pivotal in negotiating Disney's acquisition of Pixar, which is one of the most successful corporate acquisitions in recent history. But that negotiation also had some fits and starts.
Oh, it did. Well, the negotiation, the renegotiation with Disney back in 1997 was very tumultuous. It took like a year and a half, and this is one story I tell in the book when we decided to walk away from that deal. And walking away from that renegotiation would have consigned Pixar to low or no profits for years and years to come. But there were just certain conditions that we knew that we needed, and that was a very difficult one. The later
you talk about putting these non-negotiables on a whiteboard that you and Jobs said, these are our 4 non-negotiables. And we might as well let them know these are our non-negotiables. We're not going in there high and then we're going to negotiate down. This is it.
Yes. When it came to negotiating, Steve and I were very often of one mind. We would debate and discuss endlessly. Working with Steve was like a continuous dialogue, morning, noon, and night. We would we would exchange sides at different positions. But when we finally were prepared for negotiations, we knew exactly what we needed and why, so we had a lot of conviction about it.
And it's interesting that you in some ways it was a very unusual negotiation tactic. You didn't go in with a backup plan. You had your plan, what you wanted, you presented it, and that was it.
Yes, it's interesting. There are many different tactics for negotiation, and it's not that one is good for everything. But at least in the case of Steve and myself, we didn't like to have backup plans, and the reason for that is because you're basically negotiating with yourself, and so you've decided, I want A, but in the back of your mind, you know that you're willing to take B. So you've already conceded by, in playing sort of ping pong in your own mind, and so we were always of the mind, no, let's decide what we want and go get it. And if we can't get it, then we won't do the deal. It doesn't mean there's no compromising, but it's a much stronger position to come from.
There's many people that feel that's not really negotiation, that's making a demand. How do you respond to that?
I think there's some truth to that, but I think it depends whether you're cavalier about it or not. When we went into these things, we had done an enormous amount of homework, and we needed these things for a reason. How would Disney present Pixar's brand? This was something we talked endlessly about, and we just got to a point and we said, look, this is absolutely what we need. And so we would stick with it. I mean, there is back and forth on the details, so it's not 100% rigid. But it perhaps does lean towards that demanding side a little bit.
Yes, and that was one of the points. You wanted Pixar to have a brand presence in all of Disney's films.
Yes, all of Pixar's films, because people at the time I used to go all over the place, and people would say to me, well, Pixar did this great technology for that Disney film Toy Story, and
yes.
It would be like, no, we rented the whole film, the story, the characters, and everything, and so we realized it was going to take a lot to be perceived as the filmmaker, and so that made us, from a strategic point of view, very strong about the fact that we needed to get Pixar's name associated with Pixar's films, and of course now everybody understands that, but the reason for that is because of that negotiation back then where we secured that right.
And Disney resisted that quite a bit.
Yes, Disney resisted it, and understandably. It was Michael Eisner at the time, and he felt that because of Disney's power in the marketplace, that they would build up Pixar's brand, and then Pixar would go away, so Disney would have created its worst enemy, so he was worried about that.
Yes, he was. But he did come back to the table. We have to take a short intermission. When we return, we'll find out how the leaders of tomorrow's animation companies can build human-centered organizations. You're listening to the Costa Report. I'm here today with Scott Caraccioli of Caraccioli Cellars. Scott, we keep hearing about the wines that are being developed in Monterey County. How would you describe the climate conditions for grapes?
Monterey County has a lot of little pockets that give you the opportunity to grow a variety of grapes. It comes down to the match of location and climate with the varietal that you're going to grow. And where we grow in the Highlands, it's prototypical cool climate. We're even in the northern side of the Highlands. So that is ideal for both Pinot and Chardonnay. Chardonnay strives really well in a lot of our county, as well as Pinot, but I would say that this is the most optimal location. You get wind, you get sun exposure. The benches come off of the inland side of the coastal mountains. It's an optimal position. You can order any of our products directly from us by visiting our website, caraccioliCellars.com, or calling the tasting room directly, 831-622-7722.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, I had one thing on my mind. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball every chance I could. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn the signs of a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. Because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. I'm Paul George. Protect the ones you love. Spot a stroke F-A-S-T. Fast. Life is why. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association in the Ad Council.
Women now make up 37% of the workforce, changing their role forever.
Harvard Medical School has now opened its doors to new female applicants.
The first woman is now in space.
The majority of last year's doctorate degrees were earned by women.
We've come so far, but our news is changing for the worse. More women die from heart disease and stroke than men, even though it can be prevented. Make a change at goredforwomen.org today. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women.
Okay, what are you wearing right now?
Nothing.
That's right. So Mommy's going to teach you how to dress yourself. Underwear always comes first, name tag at the back, then pants, then shirt. Get the first button in the right hole or you have to start all over. Socks going first, then shoes, right on right, left on left. With shoelaces, just take the ends, cross them over, switch the loops, the rabbit goes down the hole, pull tight, and you're left with bunny ears. Got it? Why are your pants on your head?
Most parenting is hard to do in just 2 minutes. But 2 minutes twice a day making sure they brush their teeth is easier, and it could help save them from a lifetime of tooth pain. Visit 2min2x.org to find out more. A message from the Partnership for Healthy Mouths, Healthy Lives, and the Ad Council.
Psst. Yeah, it's me, your heart. Listen to me. We've got to talk. High blood pressure is serious, and yours? Whoa. What happened to us? We used to be so much more active. But lately, you've been ignoring me. I know you think I'm just gonna keep ticking away forever, but you're wrong. You can do so much more to control your high blood pressure. Doing the minimum isn't doing enough. I'm under a lot of pressure and can quit whenever I want. Bet you didn't know that. But I like my job. Just treat me better. Check on me. Give me something green to nibble on every once in a while. And maybe we can do some exercise on occasion. Let's get to it. After all, we're in this together.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get your blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late. Find out how at heart.org/blood pressure. Check, change, control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is Lawrence Leevy. Mr. Leevy, you have a history of pushing the forefront of new frontiers, not only at Pixar, but also at EFI and in your legal career, protecting intellectual property. So it comes as no surprise that you're now on the forefront of blending Eastern philosophy and meditation practices with the challenges of modern life. So tell us how your experience at Pixar deepened your interest in Eastern philosophy.
Well, it was Pixar and my entire career before that. I began to observe that in contemporary culture, what I call performance culture, the culture that produces all kinds of amazing technologies and prosperity, has within it a lot of hidden costs. And those hidden costs take the form of things like very high levels of stress, low levels of what I would call kind of self-worth in a way, or sort of lack of contentment. And in recent years, even what I call sort of technology angst, sort of a tethering to technology that doesn't leave us any room for even breathing hardly. So I could see that it didn't matter how much success we had, we weren't necessarily living well. And I really wanted to understand more about that, and that's why I decided to I had sort of a passion about that for a long time, and so I decided to go off and really explore what that was all about.
I think you just said something that I have to believe resonates with all 2 to 3 million listeners that are tuning in today, and that is that success does not mean you are living well.
Not at all. I'm not even sure they're terribly well correlated. The problem is that we think that they are. We believe that if we just have more of things, sort of more money or more fame or more power or you name it, that somehow we'll be in Shangri-La. But I think we've proven over and over again that that's not true, because we're living in a culture. Certainly, those of us fortunate to be in nice areas like the East Coast, the West Coast, different places around the country where we have everything, material success, healthcare, education, literacy, you name it. We should be in Shangri-La by most measures of human performance. But a lot of us don't feel that way. And I think it's because we sort of, in that race to success, we're ignoring the thing that has the most impact on our experience, which is our quality of mind. And that's a different kind of endeavor.
Now, you see a direct connection between Pixar's success and something you call the middle way. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yes, the middle way is an ancient philosophy. It comes out of the East, and it's been around for 2,500 years. But it's a philosophy of harmony, and it says that whenever we get stuck in extremes and we're not harmonizing the conflicting forces within us, we'll have a lot of sort of misery and suffering in a way. And I use Pixar as an analogy for this by saying you can think of the middle way as if we have two people inside of us. One person is a bureaucrat whose job is to get things done, to worry about things. Will I wake up in the morning? Do I have enough money in the bank? Who's going to make the dinner? All those kinds of things. The other person inside of us you can think of as a free spirit or an artist. That person just wants to live and love and laugh, play, connect with other people, all of those things. And the challenge is when we get stuck in either one of those places, we can be frustrated. If life is all bureaucracy, all about getting things done, we might wonder if we ever really lived. And if life is all artistry, and then we may be frustrated by lack of momentum. So when I joined Pixar, it was the quintessential starving artist. Amazing artistry, completely frustrated by lack of momentum. No joy or happiness in there because of that frustration. What we essentially did at Pixar is put enough bureaucracy, strategy, administration around the artistry to give it momentum without killing the spirit. And that is one of the tricks to what I would, in a way, call, living well, is how do we keep the spirit alive, the artistry, the creativity, the vitality, the bounce of life, and still keep moving forward. And if we look at our, even our relationships with other people or the endeavors we do in life, that's a trick to finding that balance, and that's what the middle way is all about.
And you talk about these human-centered organizations that practice the middle way. If a person was deciding on whether to go to work for a company that was human-centered versus not practicing the middle way, what would they look for?
Well, it all depends what you want. I mean, I put it this way.
Let's say they were looking for a work environment that was similar to the environment that you created at Pixar, where you had just enough bureaucracy, right, in order to create momentum and success, but there was also an equal accommodation for artistry, creativity, and a healthy relationship with failure.
You would look for a company where you had a feeling that the people or the individuals that you met put humans first. This was always the creed by which I did my work in business. It doesn't, even when you're doing difficult things, if you have to do layoffs or if you have to fire somebody or reprimand somebody or, those are the hard things, remembering that no matter what, there's still a human being across there. If you remember that, it doesn't change necessarily what you might have to do, but it changes the way you do it. And it changes the culture of that organization. And I think that's the part that somehow is easy to lose in the name of sort of profits and success and business.
It is. We can get so driven, particularly these days where analysts are looking quarter by quarter at short-term objectives. There's such extreme pressure for performance and to meet many times unrealistic expectations. Could you give us an example of a successful company or a successful leader who you feel exemplifies the middle way and is striving for that human-centered culture? An example outside of Pixar. I forget the name of the book. Good to Great is a book. That's the name of the book, where there's several examples in there. I don't remember off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. But they tend to be, they're often the quieter companies, the names that you haven't heard of, the people that aren't on the covers of magazines. I think there are many companies out there are like that. But then there are many, many more that are sort of caught up in this performance grind in a way. And the question I believe we have to ask ourselves over time is that really getting us what we want? We're minting more billionaires than we ever have before, and
Silicon Valley has now become sort of the power center of corporate America in a way where it wasn't, when I first came here. But is this creating the kind of world that we want? And I'm all for, sort of innovation, prosperity, performance. But what I'm interested in is just balancing it with this other side. When it's all about performance all the time, then I think we have a heavy price to pay.
Yes, and that gets back to that if it's all about performance, it's taking an extreme position. It's not balanced. After all, I mean, we're not robots. We're not programmed robots. We are human beings, and we have to have some accommodation for what makes us human. I have been fortunate most of my career to be mentored by Edward Wilson, who I'm sure you're familiar with out of Harvard University. And one of his wonderful books on human nature is such a wonderful relief to read because it reminds us that taking an extreme position and treating ourselves as though we're programmable robots may not be the path to fulfillment. So I deeply appreciate that you're bringing in, again, you're on the forefront of something that I think is going to become more and more part of the national dialogue, which is success and performance actually what we're after? Or is it a balanced and fulfilling life? Now, we have to take another break, but we'll be right back after these important messages from today's sponsors. Stay with us. You're listening to the Costa Report. Listen up, because I want to let you in on a little secret. You don't have to be a psychic to know which business and political experts are going to be on the Costa Report next month. All you have to do is sign up for our free monthly newsletter at RebeccaCosta.com. It takes less than a minute, and when you do, you'll receive our guest schedule along with special announcements and free offers the first of every month. So go to RebeccaCosta.com and sign up today.
Hi, I'm Joan London. If you're worried about your parent or loved one living alone, like I was, and you want reliable senior care information, then call A Place for Mom, the nation's largest senior living referral service.
Finding an apartment that was on the courtyard with the view of the trees, the view of the ducks, the stream, the creek, all of that was what I needed.
You'll get free information on assisted living, Alzheimer's care, nursing homes, even important financial information. Here's the number.
To speak with a local senior living advisor, call A Place for Mom at 800-451-2976. That's 800-451-2976.
A Place for Mom is a free service, and you can trust them to help you. So if you're struggling to find reliable senior living information, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
To speak with a local senior living advisor, call A Place for Mom at 800-451-2976. That's 800-451-2976.
Hi there, I'm Bob Eubanks. You know, as part of Hollywood for a long time, I've seen my fair share of celebrities get in trouble with the IRS. Well, there's one name I trust, the Tax Defense Group. So if you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS, you really need to call my friends at the Tax Defense Group. They offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and they're open 24 hours a day because they know that tax debt doesn't sleep either.
Call 800-257-2910. 800-257-2910.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard. So you don't need to mooch off your friends.
You gonna finish that grape?
You mean the one in my mouth?
You don't need to stop buying the necessities.
What you're smelling is a natural musk.
Ew.
You don't need to be a medical test subject.
How do you feel?
Mostly okay. Sometimes, though.
You don't need to get a second job as a stuntman.
We need a new stuntman. Let's break for lunch.
You just need an internet connection. Don't get left behind. Start your personal savings plan with the tips and tools on feedthepig.org. That way, you don't need to sell your soul to the devil.
$15 is the best I can do.
All right, deal.
Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Hey, America. We need to have a little talk. I don't know if you've noticed, but we got a lot of food in this country. A lot of peaches, a lot of corn, a lot of apples, a lot of everything. We've got so much food that we can't even eat it all. So if we got all this extra food, how are 17 million kids in America struggling with hunger? I just don't get it. That's why the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks gathers surplus food and gets it to the hungry kids who need it. They can get you food even if you live in Idaho or Alaska or somewhere crazy like that. This isn't complicated. We got extra food and we've got hungry kids. Feeding America's done the math. Now it's your turn. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. I know you got internet on your phone, so what are you waiting for? We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is former CFO of Pixar and author of To Pixar and Beyond, Lawrence Levy. Now, we live in a time of tremendous polarization and extremes. Society as a whole appears to be moving in the opposite direction of the middle way. Even the media, which used to strive to present objective reporting, has surrendered to sensationalism in order to get ratings. What do you say to people who worry that instead of clarity, our thinking is becoming more confused, more muddled, and even chaotic?
Well, I say the solution in a way begins at home. I think in some ways there's no surprise. We are where we're at. We're seeing the sort of maybe the last throes, but sort of the evolution of this kind of corporate performance at all costs kind of culture, and it's starting to sort of tear us apart a little bit. I think we have to reconnect with something that I would call like a depth tradition, a wisdom tradition. We have to reconnect with the sources that will sustain us in a different way, and that will take time. But I say to people, at an individual level, we can each do that ourselves in our own lives, and if enough of us do it, then we will make inroads and change into our culture.
Well, let's talk about that, about each of us and what we could do. I was raised in Japan, where meditation and stillness was part of my childhood. It's helped me to become extremely focused as an adult, but I've noticed that people seem to have less and less time for quiet contemplation, getting away from devices and the demands of modern life. Isn't making time a big challenge?
I think it's the challenge. I say that the hardest part of meditation is finding 5 minutes a day to do it. But we're faced with a choice. It's if we don't do it, we won't get off the treadmill. Meditation is the grounds on which we can learn to experience life in a different way. We have to practice that kind of experience. And when I wake up in the morning, this is how I start my day. I know that there's a rush of emails and text messages and all of that stuff waiting for me.
Yes.
And it's so easy to want to sort of reach over and pick up the phone or the computer or whatever and just jump in. And I know that the moment I jump in, I'm sunk for the day. I won't get back out of it to find that. So I don't start my day like that. I won't even look at it until I've made my cup of tea. I picked a little flower from the garden. I put it in my meditation room. I've sat down and I've had that period of stillness and contemplation and grounding and centering myself for the day. And that then informs and infuses my whole day, and I just find that a really enjoyable way to be. And so we have to make the time for it. There's no easy way to do that. We kind of got to sort of reclaim a little bit of space for ourselves.
How about Speaking to leadership, let's say leadership in government or at the highest ranks of large corporations, do you see a way that some of these Eastern practices could be deployed by leaders?
I think it goes to the core of a very philosophy of leadership. So in many places today, leadership is about self-aggrandizement, and so leaders are in place for the perpetuation of their own sort of power and wealth and this and that. Whereas you look at some of these models from the past, the sort of hero's journey, the bodhisattva path, some of these great philosophies written in the past, leadership is really, in my view, ought to be a privilege. It ought to be a source of joyful sacrifice in a way. Leadership is an act of sacrifice. It's because you have the talent and the skill and the ability to help other people, accomplish something together. It's a heroic act. But today, more often than not, it's sort of become an act of, how do I get the most out of this? And
so how do we change that? How can we change that? How can we take it out of self-aggrandizing into sacrifice for the greater good?
I think by having conversations like this is why my work at the Juniper Foundation is dedicated to nothing but this. And I understand this is generational work. We're not going to change this overnight. But I think if enough of us start to lay the seeds and the ideas and the conversation and the practical things that we can do, eventually we could get to a place where we would say, no, we don't want that kind of leader anymore. We want this kind of leader. And then, hiring will change and organizations will begin to change.
But I do think that it sort of is one of these things where we can't recognize that kind of leader unless we get our own house in order, unless we ourselves can be deliberate, meditative, calm, joyful. Unless we can find those assets within ourselves, it's very hard to recognize them in others.
I think that's right. I think this is the first sort of precept of you call it the hero's journey if you like, but is to take care of our own house first, because otherwise we're just sort of imposing our own agenda on the world around us without ever really looking at where that's coming from. So we're satisfying our own needs, our own cravings, as opposed to cultivating a way of being where we're truly feeling connected to others, part of something bigger, and acting from that place. We have to train in that, and that's what the meditation is all about. That's what my work now is all about.
There are a lot of people that are listening today that are working 2 jobs to pay rent, keep food on the table. And this is all sounding probably pretty far-fetched as a solution to the challenges they face. So bring this all home for us today. Help us make the connection between meditation, stillness, and success in life. Not necessarily performance, but success in life.
Well, again, it's about balance. Even, for example, like if you're going through a difficult time or challenges in life, whether they're economic challenges or they could be health challenges, suddenly struck with illness or disease or problems in the family, what are the resources that we draw upon to help us through that? So my way of seeing it is that if you even have some kind of contemplative practice, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, some place to go where you can tap into a deeper part of yourself, a deeper source of kind of insight and wisdom. It only enhances our capacity to deal with whatever sort of hardships are coming our way. This is a system to give us coping tools. It's not a luxury, that we sort of accomplish everything and then we go up to the mountains or something like that. I think it's the opposite. I think these kinds of practices are very pragmatic, and we can incorporate them, into our lives right now, even though we're going through things that are challenging.
I like what you said about it allows you. It may not make the difficulties go away, but it does put them in perspective, and that perspective alone is a coping mechanism.
Absolutely. A lot about this. A famous philosopher said the difference between samsara, which is suffering, and nirvana, which is sort of joy and bliss, is a matter of perspective. That's it. It's a shift in the mind and the way we see things. It's hard, it's not necessarily easily won, but the more steps we take in that direction, the more tools we'll have, and to at least the bumps can be a little lower, and the landings a little softer when we fall.
Yes, and one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that mind control is life control. And with that type of meditation, it allows us to gain more control over our perspective and our lives in general. I'm afraid we are all out of time, Mr. Levy, but before we say goodbye, let me congratulate you again on your book, To Pixar and Beyond, and thank you for taking time to speak with us today. I hope you'll come back.
I will. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And that wraps up our first hour. My guest next week is the former founder and CEO of AOL and successful venture capitalist Steve Case. He'll be here to talk about the critical role startups and investments in innovation play in the U.S. economy. I can't wait to find out, because every time I talk to Steve Case, I have new ideas on where I should invest and where I should. And I always feel behind on we were just talking to Lawrence Leevy about this, and he was talking about the fact that before he checks his emails in the morning, he picks a flower, he takes a moment to meditate. Well, I'll tell you, folks, I am the poster child for waking up in the morning and already feeling like I am behind. And I know you know what I'm talking about. But let's take some advice from Lawrence Leevy and take a moment to gather our thoughts at the beginning of each day. It will make the day easier to get through. Don't miss the one and only Steve Case next week, right here on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Hi, it's MZ from KSCO in Santa Cruz, and though I don't care much for people who brag, I'm going to do just a little of it now, and hope you will give me a pass by calling it Just Being Proud. Our station can afford to be innovative and refreshingly different because we use education and logic to promote great health products that change people's lives for the better. We also help people build strong businesses that create residual income through a wonderful low-cost business opportunity that we have developed and refined during the last 20 years. We believe that Rebecca Costa's large audience is comprised of particularly intelligent and educated persons, some of whom may want to earn more money. If you are tired of being someone else's wage slave and are ready to go to work building your own excellent supplement business that can provide you and your family income and become a saleable and willable asset, I want to talk with you. Send an email to mz@wedon'thavetobepoor.com. That's mz@wedon'thavetobepoor.com.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. I improved my credit score.
You're kidding, right?
No.
How are we supposed to be the bad boys of electro-synth pop if you're out there being responsible? The band is about to be discovered. This is our year.
Yeah, you've been saying that for a while now.
You think anyone in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was worried about their credit score?
I never really thought that.
Of course they weren't. Rock stars aren't supposed to think about that kind of stuff. We're supposed to think about how many guitars we've smashed, write aggressively sensitive power ballads, start questionable fashion trends, tragically break up and blame creative differences.
All right. I thought maybe it was time to take control of my finances, you know? Start using a budget. Get out of debt. Set some goals.
A budget? Debt? Set some goals? Listen, I knew that we'd have our creative differences, but I was hoping they'd involve a little more scandal.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
The Costa Report is now heard in all 50 states on fine radio stations, including this one.